not solve the issues, but we're going to debate them hard. From America's home of funk, Motown, and rock and roll in the heart of downtown Detroit. At Music Town in the Lift Lounge, this is It's Debatable with Tom Jordan.
Hey everybody, welcome to this is the first program of It's Debatable in the history of It's Debatable. Never happened before. You are the first audience, so thank you for being here. Glad to have you. This is a homegrown show. It's a debate, kind of a meets late night talk show with a kick of Detroit flavor in it. We've got music, of course. We've got food, drinks. We've got a raucous crowd, so thanks for coming tonight. We also have 6 candidates who care deeply about tonight's issue. It goes by different names. You might have heard it called Sensimilia. If you're of the reggae flavor, you might have heard of Lamb's Bread. Anybody heard of that before? Thank Peter Tosh, Bob Marley. Ganja, cannabis, pot, marijuana. We're talking about marijuana tonight and the legalization of marijuana in the state of Michigan. Like many other states across the country, Michigan is considering legalizing pot, marijuana for recreational use, and it's on the November 6th ballot. It's called the Michigan Marijuana Legalization Initiative. We were going to have this debate earlier today, but we moved it to the evening, so I appreciate you coming. About half the candidates were busy at about 4:20 this afternoon doing something. I don't know what they were doing, but they asked us to push it off. So here we are. So thanks for being here. Before I introduce the candidates, I want to say hello to the band here. This is the Dog Kings. Let's give it up for the Dog Kings. All right, thank you, the Dog Kings. It's a trio. It kind of harkens back to the day of bands like Rush. Dwayne is the singer and the guitarist. Can't see you over there. Where are you? I'll come around the pillar here. Describe the band. What kind of music do you play? How often do you play together?
David and I, the bass player, we've been together forever, and David and Leland, the drummer. Leland is the son of our actual drummer who went to high school with David, so this is like a family thing that just keeps growing. But those guys have been together since high school. David and I have been playing together for 20 years, so. And then now we have the second generation coming in to fill in the gap. So
and this thing is never going to end, is it? Now you got this generation coming up. Leland's going to have kids, probably sometime too. His baby will start playing music. So you're a trio. You it reminds me of bands like Rush or the Police. So you're kind of like the Sting of the Dog Kings. Is that correct? Would that be correct?
All right. Or the Phil Collins. I get that a lot too.
Yeah. Or just Dwayne from the Dog Kings. I like that better. Dog Kings. You guys heard of the marijuana? You guys familiar with the pot, the cannabis? No.
What is it? I've heard hemp. It's like a rope, right?
It's like clothing, I think.
You use it to tie things together?
We'll learn more about it as the program goes on. Thanks to the Dog Kings. More from them. By the way, Dwayne Allen Harlick's his full name. He's got an album, Beneath the Surface. It is available online at Amazon.com and other spots as well. Basically, to give you a kind of a summary of what this initiative is going to do, a yes vote on this in the state of Michigan means that anybody 21 years of age and older can smoke, can possess, and even sell marijuana in the state of Michigan. It'll be taxed at 10%. That is on top of a 6% sales tax. So really you're looking at about 16% of a tax on the sale of marijuana if it is passed in November. If it's not passed, then everything stays the same. Otherwise, it's going to be virtually impossible to get marijuana if this is not passed in November, right? As it is right now. All right, here are the rules of the road for tonight. There's going to be a 1-minute opening statement from each of the candidates as they come up. This is a one-on-one debate in 3 different segments. We have 6 candidates. Opening statement for each candidate. They get a question, 2 questions, each with a 1:30 answer, and then a 30-second rebuttal from the opposing candidate. After those 2 questions, each candidate then can ask one another 1 question with a 1-minute answer. We are asking the candidates to be respectful of each other. They can debate the issue vehemently. They can espouse their opinions hard, but we ask that they don't demean the other candidate. We want to get this out on the table and understand what this issue is coming up in November. Unlike other debates, we will not ask the audience to hold their applause until the end of the debate. So you're free to hoot and holler. We just ask that you wait until the candidate is completed and finished asking their questions. All of the candidates have agreed to disagree on the issue, but again, they will do it respectfully. I want to introduce the candidates here. The first group, Barton Morris is the principal attorney and the founder of the Cannabis Legal Group and the spokesperson with the Coalition to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol, Barton Morris. He will debate a man who'd like to keep Michigan green, but not that kind of green. His name is Matthew Yaskold. He is with he's the grassroots director of Healthy and Productive Michigan. Scott Macy. Yeah, thank you. Scott Macy now, he is with Brighton Recovery Center. Scott Macy is a familiar face when it comes to this kind of debate. He is an advocate for keeping marijuana illegal in the state of Michigan. He will go up against dispensary owner and marijuana practitioner Frank Mara. Also, our third batch of candidates, Tom Levine is an attorney with who heads the Cannabis Council in Detroit. They've been in business dealing with the law of cannabis all the way since 2010. He will debate with the former Speaker of the Michigan House of Representatives and newly appointed with Healthy and Productive Michigan, Randy Richardville. Those are the candidates for tonight. Are you ready now to get this thing started? All right, let's get it going. Welcome back to the program. We're going to start now the first segment of this debate. Our first two candidates, Matthew Yaskold, the grassroots director of Healthy and Productive Michigan. Barton Morris is the principal attorney and founder of the Cannabis Legal Group and spokesperson with Coalition to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol. We're going to start with our opening statements here, and Barton Morris won the coin toss, which we held just before the debate. Mr. Morris, if you want to start with your opening statement.
Thanks, Tom. I am very passionate about this. The war on drugs and the war on marijuana specifically has failed. Did you guys know that African Americans, Hispanics, and minorities are 3.3 times more likely to be arrested for non-violent marijuana offenses in this country? There's 20,000 arrests a year in Michigan for non-violent possession of marijuana offenses, when marijuana is not hurting anybody. It's simply causing a significant tax on our criminal justice system and our resources. That's got to change, and we have the ability to do so. We've had medical marijuana here since 2008, and now we have the ability to legalize recreational marijuana on November 6th of this year. We'll be the 10th state to do it, and we're going to be a very significantly large market. And what that's going to do, because we finally have that commercialized marketplace in effect now, is going to significantly reduce that black market that needs to be done. The black market has been spiraling out of control. It's been allowing cannabis to be getting in the hands of those that is not intended, those that are under the age of 21, those shouldn't be using marijuana. Instead, it's going to be regulated. It's going to cause a significant increase in our economy. It's going to decrease our unemployment rate, which is significantly higher than the national average, and it's going to increase our tax base.
All right, Barton Morris, thank you very much. Matthew Yaskold, you get a minute 30.
That market will be worse.
I'm here because we're not in an opiate epidemic, we're in an addiction epidemic. And there are many paths to addiction, thank you, just like there are many paths to recovery. But the point is, we're being presented with something that says we either need to legalize or incarcerate. And legalization is really industrialization and commercialization. As a father, as someone who's lost friends to this addiction epidemic, this is not the right path to take. Marketing edibles to children, going down a path that big tobacco's already blazed. Yep. When we're in this for our community, not for money, not for profiting big businesses.
Go ahead. All right. As a result of the coin toss going to Barton Morris, Matthew Yaskold has the first question here, and you will have a minute 30 to respond. Public support for legalizing marijuana went from 12% in 1969 to about 64% today. That is from a 2017 Gallup poll. A recent state poll puts that number much closer, 40% no to 44% yes, which put this now in the state of Michigan within the margin of error. It has been legalized in 9 states, also in Washington, D.C. So with so much public support nowadays, why not get ahead of the game, legalize marijuana, put restrictions in place to better control an already highly used drug?
Well, you know, you touched on the social acceptance of marijuana, and the lobby dollars in Colorado when it first passed were 44 to 1. Let's talk about the tobacco epidemic and how big tobacco learned how to market. That normalization has been happening of a substance that's still extremely detrimental to our societies and extremely can lead to the path of other substances and other addictions. Coming as a substance abuse counselor, as someone who worked with kids in communities, that making more drugs more accessible is not the right answer.
Okay. Martin Morris, you get 30 seconds to respond.
I don't think you really answered the question. The question was, why don't we get out in front of it and regulate it, right? And that's exactly what we should be doing. That's what we do with alcohol. Yet I think everybody agrees that alcohol is significantly more dangerous and harmful to the public good than cannabis. Alcohol kills 88,000 people every single year. Marijuana kills nobody. And so what we have to do is regulate it. We have to test it, and that's what we're going to do. All the cannabis that's sold at these dispensaries and retail establishments, they're going to be tested for safety, for potency, to ensure that people are getting what they want. And they're not being marketed to children. In fact, there are specific rules that are designed to ensure that they're not regulated for children. This is something that the Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs takes very, very seriously. They cannot, and there's rules that protect it. And so that's what you're talking about, these rules to ensure that it stays out of the hands of minors.
All right, thank you very much. The next question goes to Barton Morris. About half of all adults have tried marijuana in this country. The elephant in the room is the recreational drug use in this country is at a staggering level. Why do you think it would be wise to further perpetrate America's obsession with feeling and getting high when there are already so many other options out there? In other words, why do we need another drug in America?
Marijuana is not going anywhere, so we don't need another drug. It's the same drug. It's not, whether we legalize it or not, it's not going anywhere. So what we need to do is legalize it and then ensure that it's being regulated. Just like I had said earlier. Marijuana, people are going to use it, right? Like you said, recreationally. So why not ensure that states have the ability to be able to tax it, right? And make sure that they have the ability to ensure that it's being distributed in a safe manner. That black market, that's what needs to be eliminated. There's no black market for alcohol, right? And so alcohol can be purchased and sold and consumed in almost every conceivable place, including the place we're here right now. Same thing should be true for cannabis, because cannabis is not the dangerous drug that leads to even, like I'm sure he's going to say that the cannabis has got an ability to allow people to use other drugs. There's no evidence of that, right? There's no evidence that it's a gateway drug. Cannabis is a drug that people use recreationally, just like alcohol. It's safer than alcohol, and therefore it should be regulated like alcohol.
Matthew Yasko, your rebuttal.
Barton said that marijuana is not going anywhere. Well, it's certainly going somewhere if it becomes legalized. It's going to be turned into 90%, 99.9% THC extracts that we don't have experience with. The medical field does not understand what that much THC can do. To give you a little bit of perspective, THC content in marijuana used to be around 20%. Now when we're looking at that high of rates of THC being introduced into someone's body, and also marijuana is not going anywhere, it's going to turn into marketing to kids. Like I've said before, we're going to be looking at potato chips with THC in it, soda pop with cool colors. That's not for adults.
All right. The next question does go back to Matthew Yaskold. It's estimated that if marijuana was legalized recreationally across the country, it would become America's #1 cash crop. Some estimates put this at $120 billion a year. When you're talking about this amount of money, and it's assumed that this will be the case in Michigan as well, this has the potential to bring in resources to some of the most rural and impoverished areas of the state. Why would you be opposed to that?
Once you get folks whose business it is to increase addiction, then you have a public health problem on your hands. And pro-legalization has spent $15 million to pass their initiative. They're going to continue to spend tons across the nation to continue to pass these initiatives. And I think that it's a political calculation just as much as it is a business investment. And when we look at a 10% excise tax rate, and we look at all the costs that we're going to get from, like, just tobacco. Big Tobacco had costs of emphysema, COPD, lung cancer, all these other unforeseen costs that are going to come to society, costs through Medicaid, that this will not profit Michigan. It will not be a cash crop.
You tell them that.
Go ahead, Matt.
Your rebuttal?
First, I want to say that I think everybody should know, and everybody probably knows, that marijuana acutely cannot kill anyone, right? You can smoke as much as you want. You can have the most potent marijuana ever available, 100% THC, and you cannot die from it, unlike alcohol.
That's not.
Now,
To address the audience to wait until after the candidates.
to address the issue that you talked about specifically is the fact that when Michigan legalizes marijuana, it's going to create a $1.5 billion market in 2020 just to start. That's going to be a significant amount of revenue, tax revenue for the state. It's going to specifically designated for our schools, for our roads, and for the municipalities and counties in which the facilities are going to be operating. That's going to be, it's not going to be a significant amount of money compared to the fact that we have a $14 billion school budget, but it is enough to make a difference, and that's what's important. Right now, that's not happening.
All right, Barton Morris, thank you. The final question for me in this segment goes to Barton Morris. You have said, and you mentioned this in your opening statement, that minorities are incarcerated at a greater rate for marijuana use and possession or sale of marijuana than others, basically from white people, in comparison to white people. But less than 1% of people in our prisons or jails are actually in jail or incarcerated because of marijuana. Why do you truly believe this is a race issue, legalizing marijuana in the state? And why do you believe it's a race issue?
Well, I believe it's a race issue because the American Civil Liberties Union has done a study and found it to be true. It is a race issue. And as far as the numbers of those that are incarcerated in jail, that number is going down. The fact of the matter is that marijuana, possession of marijuana on the first offense is a misdemeanor, on a second offense it's a felony, but our judges recognize that it is not justice to be putting people, incarcerating them in jail. Right? That is going away from that, but it's still causing people to get convicted. Misdemeanor convictions, felony convictions for possession of marijuana, for growing marijuana in your home, that's a felony, right? That keeps people from getting jobs, it keeps them from getting money from grants, from student loans. It significantly interferes and affects their ability to be able to take care of themselves, their family, and participate in our society, and that's just simply wrong for a drug that is not hurting anybody.
Your rebuttal?
As an outsider's perspective from this community, I can't, and I'd like to humble myself, I can't speak for these communities, but I don't think that we have a successful track record when it comes to alcohol, particularly in regards to minorities and minority communities where you see liquor stores saturated every half mile. There's a statistic that I heard out of Colorado that in some minority communities in Denver, there's one pot shop for every 47 people. A study of FBI uniform crime rates conducted in the Center of Juvenile and Criminal Justices concluded that more Black and Hispanic youth are being arrested for marijuana in Colorado after legalization than before. Kids increased 5%, white kids decreased 8%. Hispanic kids increased 23%, and African American kids increased 58%.
All right, now we have moved to the section where the candidates get to ask each other one question. We will start the asking of the questions with Barton Morris.
I would like to know your opinion on the dangers of alcohol as it relates to marijuana. Because alcohol has been legal since the end of Prohibition, why shouldn't marijuana have that same right?
I think we're talking about normalization and acceptance from society. I think making more drugs more accessible is not going to help the way we're going to be looking at increased polysubstance use. I've seen numbers, I don't have them in front of me right now, but numbers out of Washington where more driving accidents are occurring from polysubstance use. So by polysubstance, I mean alcohol and marijuana being used at the same time. That if we just create more mind-altering drugs, that we're going down the wrong path.
Yep.
Matthew?
For a second?
Yeah, you want a rebuttal? Go ahead. We'll allow you to do the same
Studies
thing.
have proven that in states with legalized marijuana, the alcohol use has decreased. while marijuana use increases. And so what you've said regarding the polysubstance abuse phenomenon is not true.
Next question is from Matthew Yasko to Barton Morris.
It's obvious your campaign has much more funding than we do because you have more profits to gain if this initiative passes. Profits strikingly similar to those of R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris Big Tobacco that will be filling the pockets of your investors. Unlike your campaign, when this ends, if we defeat this, we just get to leave saying that I protected my son's future. A lot of Michiganders have been seeing a billboard near my home that says legalized recreational marijuana has shown a reduction in opioid deaths by 25%. Can you justify a claim like that in the application of recreational marijuana for me? Because I get medical marijuana may reduce the pain threshold and reduce pain for users, but how would recreational marijuana curb this addiction epidemic?
Studies have shown in Colorado that the use of legalized recreational marijuana, it reduces the amount, and medical marijuana reduces the amount of opiate and other drugs, so prescription drugs and other illicit drugs like heroin. It reduces mortality rates, hospitalization rates. It is a solve. It solves the opiate epidemic.
All right, those are the questions. You want to rebuttal real quick? Sorry about that. Matthew Yasko, if you get to say rebuttal.
It does seem like it's kind of conflating the issue to a little bit. It's like me rolling someone out in a wheelchair and saying that this is why we need to legalize heroin, that rolling someone out in a wheelchair saying that it's going to reduce opioid-related deaths is incorrect, I believe.
All right. Thank you to these gentlemen. And up next, we're going to have audience questions, and later on, we're going to tackle some other issues related to addiction and some of the claimed effects that that marijuana has on individuals. We'll be right back with your questions coming right up on this edition of This Debatable. Thanks to the Dog Kings, great band here, based in Metro Detroit. As we're debating marijuana tonight, the legalization of marijuana in Michigan, an interesting fact from our friends at FactRetrievers.com. Did you know that spiders that are high on marijuana, they build messy webs, they're more easily distracted, they gave up easily, but spiders high on LSD did a better job at building webs than if they weren't on those LSD. So that's an interesting factoid regarding marijuana and the effects on spiders. Now we're gonna move on to the audience questions. No rebuttal on those, please. I don't think you've done the research. Okay, we're gonna start, we're gonna do the same way. We're just gonna reverse the order of the questions. We're gonna start off, each candidate gets to answer the same question. They get a minute 30 to answer the question. And we will start this time with Matthew Yasko. This is from somebody in the audience. What are your views on the legalization laws as they pertain to impaired driving legislation? So driving while high, I think is a question.
Okay. Well, we've seen an increase. I think there were 517 cases of driving while high last year in Michigan that we were able to document. And when we see more substances becoming more available that people can use outside of their homes and get the highest limits of these substances as well. So we're looking at 10 ounces, 2.5 on your person, that people are just prone to use substances while driving.
Yeah. Bart Morris, what do you think about that? Is that going to be a problem?
The coalition to regulate marijuana like alcohol forbids, and our initiative forbids driving under the influence of marijuana. It's unsafe, and nobody that I know, and nobody that is a proponent of medical marijuana, recreational marijuana, condones it. So it's unlawful. It's something that police are getting more attention and more training in order to enforce, to ensure it doesn't happen. People should not be driving under the influence of marijuana, just like they shouldn't be driving under the influence of alcohol.
All right, this brings up another question. It's somewhat related. This is from the audience. It deals with regulation. How are we going to regulate marijuana within the state? We've talked about taxation, but in terms of abiding by the laws in the state, how do we do it? Is the FDA scrutiny? Who will oversee the safety measures and whatnot? It's a complicated issue, but who is going to oversee and then implement all the regulations if marijuana is legalized in the state of Michigan?
The initiative specifically enumerates and identifies the Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs along with the Bureau of Medical Marijuana Regulation to be provided the opportunity to regulate marijuana, and that's what they're doing now with medical marijuana. So the initiative provides for that same precise manner as medical marijuana. And let me tell you something, they're doing a phenomenal job. They are ensuring that those that are not supposed to get licenses to be cultivating or selling marijuana aren't getting them. They're ensuring that the rules are significantly robust. There are new ones coming out every single day to ensure that it's properly regulated. And I agree with everything they're doing. The board right now is being really like critical of every application. But they are regulating cannabis, making sure that everybody follows the regulations and making sure that those that are in the industry are good people that aren't going to violate the rules.
All right, Matthew Yasko, do you feel confident that marijuana can be regulated safely and effectively?
Medical marijuana passed in 2008. It took until last summer to get the MMFLA in effect and actually have a board where approval processes started to happen and things started to change and actual regulations started to be put in place. So I think that we need to look at how things happened then and reflect on that it took so long to really tame that beast that we shouldn't create another one.
All right.
Yeah, that's not marijuana's fault.
All right, we got another question here from the audience. Marijuana is decriminalized in other countries like Portugal and the Netherlands, and those countries have lower rates of marijuana use than the United States. Why is that? Matthew Yasko.
I think we're just looking at cultures. We're looking at social acceptance. We have higher addiction rates here too. We're looking at an opiate crisis here in the United States, an addiction crisis, call it what it is, not looking at the way that our society is compared to the way European society is. I don't think it's a fair contrast.
All right, Martin Morris.
He's right, somewhat. Culturally, we are a different country than other countries, European countries, and they were different in a multitude of different ways. But look at Canada. Canada just legalized marijuana for the entire country, the second country to do it after Uruguay. This is something that is taking on over the entire world, the decriminalization of marijuana, because it has to happen, because people getting arrested for marijuana, for being in possession of it, is simply just ridiculous. And the regulation of it, the country of Canada has made that determination. That's the way that it should be taken care of, just like or similar to alcohol.
All right, my thanks to Martin Morris, Matthew Yasko. Thanks for your time and your insight. This is It's Debatable. It is the topic is legalizing marijuana in the state of Michigan. Up next on the program, we will be joined by Scott Macy with Brighton Recovery Center and marijuana dispensary owner Frank Mara. That is coming up on It's Debatable. We'll be right back. A little tidbit about marijuana. According to the United Nations, almost 160 million people around the world use marijuana, which is more than 3.8% of the population of the entire world. And according to a national survey on drug use, every day about 6,000 Americans try marijuana for the very first time. So people are using it more and more and more in this country. Welcome back. I'm Tom Jordan. This is It's Debatable. We have two new guests here going to debate the topic of legalizing marijuana in the state of Michigan. We have a dispensary owner with the Greenhouse of Walled Lake. He's a marijuana practitioner. His name is Frank Mara. And also Scott Macy is with the Brighton Recovery Center. Thanks to these two gentlemen for joining us this morning. We're going to start off with opening statements. Which one of you won the coin toss? Scott Macy, go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you, Tom. Thank you to WWJ for this opportunity. As someone who is in recovery from addiction, a father of two teenagers, and works in a treatment facility, it's really disheartening to hear a lot of the rhetoric that we're hearing about the pro-marijuana movement. I was going to start a little bit in a different way, but I just wanted to address some of the rhetoric that I just heard. I mean, it's very easy just to go to the CDC and get the information. Colorado is at the highest level they've ever seen in the number of deaths associated with heroin. It's just black and white. And unfortunately, right now, we're in unprecedented times. We're living in an opiate epidemic for the last 30 years. We've been told a lie. It's taken us 30 years to understand that lie. And we're only 4 years into legalization right now in Colorado. And to even attempt to look at the data right now is, just something that we have to continue, that we really won't know for quite a while. But what we do know right now is that there are newborns being born with THC in their systems. We do know that actually the Black and Hispanic population has seen an increase in the number of arrests that they've had. All you have to do is look at the medical dispensaries in this state and look at where they're at. They're in the most vulnerable areas of our state, of our communities, where already the liquor stores and the beer stores are.
All right. Sorry, but time is up for the opening statement. Scott Macy, thank you. Now, Frank Mara, your opening statement as well.
Yes. Thank you, guys. If recreational marijuana passes on November 6th, marijuana will not suddenly be reintroduced into our society on the 7th. That's because it's already here, and legal or not, it's not going anywhere. The sooner we can accept that, the sooner we can start to enact policies that will limit marijuana's potential harm while finally reaping some of its benefits. The 80-year-old policy of marijuana prohibition has failed. So I ask you all as potential voters to consider a new approach. By regulating and taxing marijuana, we can end the thriving black market and replace it with a legitimate industry. An industry that will bring in more than $200 million in tax revenue, and it will create thousands of jobs here in Michigan. We look at states with more mature markets like Colorado, and we see the worst fears of marijuana's critics have not been realized. While things like teen use and driving under the influence are always a concern, the numbers are in and they're clear. Marijuana legalization has not had a negative effect on traffic safety, on crime rates, on workplace safety, or youth use patterns. It has stimulated the local economy, and it's created hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue. Prohibition doesn't work. It hasn't stopped marijuana from being pervasive in our communities, in our state, or in our country. A vote yes is a vote to take the industry out of the hands of the black market, and it's a vote to enact policies that will limit marijuana's potential harm while letting us as Michiganders finally reap some of its benefits.
All right, Frank Mara, thank you. All right, the first question now goes to Frank Mara. Over the past 30 years, the population has grown in its support of legalizing recreational use of marijuana, but the nation's leading healthcare agencies oppose legalizing marijuana for recreation use, including the American Medical Association, the American Society of Addiction Medicine, the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and the American Academy of Pediatrics. There was a concern about marijuana getting into the hands of little kids somehow. Do you agree with leading medical agencies that marijuana does in fact pose some sort of a health risk?
Well, first things first, no one wants marijuana to get into the hands of children. Does marijuana pose a health risk? I mean, you look back at records from 2017, 0 deaths in 2017. That's a carryover from 2016, and that's a carryover from the entire recorded history of time. It's a non-toxic substance. Nobody has ever overdosed on marijuana, all right? I was just reading a Marist poll. There are 55 million Americans who are considered current users of marijuana, all right? Now, yes, some of them might have trouble with it, but the majority of them are responsible adult users, all right? They don't find their way into using other drugs, other harder drugs. They use responsibly, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with that.
All right, Frank Mara. Scott Macy, your rebuttal, you have 30 seconds.
Just from real life experience as someone who struggled with addiction, let's not use the word gateway. I'll just say it gave me the training wheels for my addiction, without a doubt. And then it led to polysubstance with alcohol, okay? But as of today, when you say, all you have to do is pull up YouTube, and I want to, have all the people listening and that, go to YouTube and look at all the overdoses. All you have to do is hit dabs, fail, and you'll see overdoses of marijuana, so-called marijuana. Just in the next few years, you're not going to be smoking marijuana. What you'll be doing is vaping marijuana concentrates. That's where we're going. the voters of Colorado thought they were going to be getting weed. What they got is they got 50-50 now with concentrates. And it's a generational gap in knowledge that we're experiencing right now. A lot of people are thinking back to the years that they used, just 3 to 4 years ago. Just look at what's happened with vaping. And a lot of people say, what do you mean vaping? What are you talking about? But our schools are filled with kids vaping, and what our schools and the administrators are dealing with today is unprecedented. And these kids are the ones teaching us. And we don't really know the extent. But from a standpoint, we know we are priming the adolescent brain for addiction currently.
All right.
That's what's going on in this country.
Thank you for your rebuttal, Scott Macy. Next question goes to Scott Macy. The Marijuana Policy Project, that's an organization that leads marijuana legalization campaigns, said this, quote, that marijuana policy reforms do not cause rates of youth marijuana use to increase. They say in-depth surveys show marijuana use in Colorado and in the state of Washington have slightly, in fact, decreased after it was legalized in those states. In other words, the use of marijuana amongst teens has gone down. Do you agree that teen use of marijuana decreases after the drug is legalized in those various states?
Well, thanks so much for that question, because the data is skewed. And all you have to do is go look at the data in Colorado. They did not report 4 of the biggest counties in Colorado in that data. And that's just, it's just deceiving. Denver is not in that data. And if you look at the number of youth exposures, it's exploded. It's exploded by the number of youth exposures. The number of ER visits now that kids have experienced is exploded. They're the most vulnerable, and at the most vulnerable time during their brain development are they being exposed. Look, we're living in the worst epidemic that this society's ever seen. In the most regulated industry, pharmaceuticals. And you're going to tell me that we're going to be able to regulate this? And it's not even legal federally. It's not even legal federally, so it's a cash business. It's just like me going to my drug dealer, where I used to, and paying in cash. And I had a friend that just went down and did the air handling for a dispensary. He was paid $25,000 in cash. He was scared to leave that place. Okay, how can you regulate an industry like that? And what's interesting is that now, ironically, today, right, so let's pump the brakes. Why do we need to go so quickly and legalize? Why can't we wait to the federal government? Why can't we wait for something like Canada? Because if you look at our ballot initiative, it's 2.5 ounces. It's the highest possession rate out of any state.
Scott Macy, we are, I'm sorry, out of time on your response, but thank you for your response, Scott Macy. Frank Mara, you got a rebuttal to that?
Sure. One of my favorite sayings, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, all right? Yes, there are steps to be taken the regulation isn't perfect right now, but it is moving in the right direction. No, it's not federally legal, but with every state where it becomes legal, that's another domino that's going to fall. And with you look at Canada, where it has become nationally legal there. That is that's the ultimate goal here. I think that marijuana is a safe product. I think it's a good product. I saw some of the statistics that you saw in Colorado, and it looked consistent to me. So what I saw was the data, the teen use is at the same rate as it was in 2008, all right? Marijuana was legalized in 2012, all right? So they are at the same use pre-legalization,
Oh, you got 3 seconds left. You want to get that time up here? Okay, you're good. All right.
I'm good.
I'll take it. All right, you got it? Frank Mara is the next question. There's an article in Psychology Today posted January the 5th of this year that shows a strong link between marijuana use and schizophrenia. It further quotes a schizophrenic who says, quote, the worst thing about smoking weed when you're a kid is that you really never grow up. Your life turns into a sort of haze. If marijuana is shown to have a strong link to mental illness and psychotic episodes, would you, as a marijuana distributor, be opposed to putting warning labels in your facilities and on your products?
I have zero problem with that, and that's one of the things that's great about regulation. Is the labeling, with regards to potency, with regard to what your product is. I'm not an expert on schizophrenia. Sorry, I just hit my mic. I'm not an expert on schizophrenia, but I would hope anyone with any sort of diagnosis is not trying to self-medicate. Self-medication is never a good thing. But I believe knowledge is power. We need to label our stuff properly, whether it's potency, whether it's dangerous for certain people to take. But no, to answer the question, no, I have no problem with labeling products.
All right, Scott Macy, your rebuttal to that, or your response?
And it's great to hear, but just recently, and it's kind of interesting because California just did a study. Some of the labs down there, independent labs, pulled 200 samples, and over 70% of those samples were mislabeled. Okay, you got dispensaries in Colorado recently where they sent pregnant women in for to get to talk to the bud tenders, and they were given suggestions of higher THC every time they went in there. Okay. And that's a pregnant woman going in there, and that's troubling. So where's the training? Really, let's be truthful. How are we going to regulate when again, the federal government is not on board? So and then on the top of it, you're going to see right now, for example, we have an overproduction of weed just with caregivers compared to the number of people they serve. It comes out to 36 pounds per person with a card in the state of Michigan currently.
That's the rebuttal time. Thank you very much for that. Next question goes to Scott Macy. There's a study in the Journal of Drug Issues, and I want you both to respond to this. The study shows that the number of U.S. daily marijuana users has risen dramatically since 2002, and now 68% of users report daily or near daily use. Almost 7 out of 10 users of marijuana use it either every day or almost every day. In light of that, do you believe that marijuana is addictive?
Oh, without a doubt. And it's just so disheartening that we continue to have that discussion. And Pro Marijuana has done a great job of having us, talk about that. It is very addictive. And the thing is, again, we're at unprecedented times. Just when Colorado, they approved it in 2012, they didn't go start selling in 2014. In the first 2 years, the potency increased almost 3 times because of the competition. It's upwards of almost 40%. And the human brain has never seen levels at that height. And working in treatment, some of the hardest patients to work with are the people coming in with substance abuse associated with marijuana. And they're younger and younger. And I don't know how many people come in with cards. I just had an 18-year-old kid. He's had his card. Okay, he's also a compassion grower. And he's in treatment now. That's it's all anecdotal, but it's very troubling to see what we see in the community and in just the progression. We know addiction is a progression, and it leads. Like I say, marijuana gave me my training wheels for my addiction.
Scott Macy, thank you. I'm going to give you, Frank Morrow, equal time. This last question for me in this segment, we'll give you equal time to answer that question. Is marijuana, in your view, addictive?
Sure. Well, I first want to address, I want to say, I think what Scott does is very commendable. I think he sees the worst that drugs can offer, and he truly helps people. When you talk about potency, it sounds real scary when you're talking about percentages. The fact is there's safe consumption levels for everything. And with regulation, labeling is so important. That's one of the big rules with regulation now is every product needs to be tested and needs to be labeled properly. Just like alcohol, you can have 120 proof vodka. You're not going to go out and chug a bottle of Dog Kings over there might, but you're not going to, drink a fifth of vodka. It's the same thing with these high concentrate marijuana, concentrates and edibles.
The Dog Kings just called. They want to talk to you.
But yeah, no, people can get addicted to anything. There's people addicted to shopping and to video games and to fast food. And to coffee, and of course people are going to get addicted to marijuana. It's what do we do about it, I think that we need to be educated as a society, and we need to have these conversations. But I think that there's 55 million Americans that use marijuana on a regular basis, and the majority of them use it in a responsible manner. And I think you can't ignore that.
All right, Frank Marr, thank you very much. That is this segment. We are now going to leave it to the candidates to ask each other a question. We started off this questioning with Scott Macy. We'll give it now to Frank Marr to ask Scott a question.
Sure. So, I'm an owner of the Greenhouse of Walled Lake, a medical marijuana dispensary. I think your thoughts on recreational marijuana are pretty clear. Just wanted to know your thoughts on marijuana as a medical product.
Well, and thank you for that question, because it's ironic. I was just diagnosed with cancer in December, and I can tell you, I have friends who are compassion growers. I've been introduced to different products. I have yet to find any consistency, and that's troubling to me. Even for my nausea or for appetite, and that's that's the thing with medical marijuana. Unfortunately, we just haven't done enough research, because if it's Schedule 1, it's Schedule 1. The DEA's done a little bit better job recently. They did approve a waiver, which will allow for more research. And I just think we need to pump the brakes right now a little bit, because there's a lot of research that needs to be done. When you look at substances of abuse and Schedule 1 drugs, marijuana is the least researched, the least amount of money is spent on research. And it's the hot button item in this country. And it's really troubling that that's where we're at. So, I mean, the marijuana plant, what's it got? 400 different type of chemical structures in it? There's got to be something in there, probably. But we need research, and we need peer-reviewed research.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Scott, you get to answer a Frank now question.
Well, yeah, and Frank, what I wanted to ask you was just, I know it's ironic today that the board, the Medical Marijuana Board, just after 10 years, approved the first dispensary license today. And there are quite a few dispensaries in operation right now. And I did talk to you before coming on, and you're not operating yet. Correct. Which is, I mean, great to hear that you're following the law and correct. In that. But from a standpoint of training, when we talk about regulation and what that looks like to someone that owns a dispensary, what does that look like to you?
Well, one of the things that you touched on that is very important to me is consistency. All right, I believe that all products need to be consistent. I really do believe in the labeling, the potency standards. I think that's very important. Everyone who we hire at our facility is going to be a product expert. I don't want people pushing more THC just for the fact of pushing more THC. The amount of emails I get on a weekly basis would blow your mind from people with things like muscular dystrophy, multiple sclerosis, cancer, all kinds of ailments, and they all seek help, they all seek comfort. And the plant really does have the potential to help so many people. So, I mean, I got into this business, I saw opportunity years ago, and I started looking into it, and I saw how many people this plant really does help. So I'm very passionate about it.
Okay, thanks, gentlemen. Again, the issue on the ballot in November is recreational use of marijuana. Medicinal has passed, but that is a related topic, so thanks for the answer on that. Coming up next, we're going to take the audience questions. We've got a few more up here. Feel free to fill out more of the cards. We will ask the candidates those questions coming up next. Ladies and gentlemen, yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it very much. Did you know, as we're debating legalization of recreational marijuana in the state of Michigan, that the ropes, the sails, and the caulking of the Mayflower were all made from hemp fiber? Hemp, all right. Hemp is a related plant to marijuana without the THC. Fascinating stuff. Thanks for coming back. We appreciate it. The debate is legalization of marijuana in the state of Michigan. It's on the November 6th ballot. We got audience questions now. This one first. is going to Frank. As a dispensary owner, are you willing to earmark some of your profits for treatment?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think treatment is a good thing. I don't know where it would go or what, sort of treatment, but I absolutely think it's a good thing. They're estimating that in Michigan, the recreational marijuana industry will be about $900 million, all right? And that they're estimating $200 million in tax revenue from that. I know a big portion of that will go to treatment centers. It'll also go to schools, education, infrastructure. But personally, yeah, I mean, I have no problem donating money to treatment.
All right, that's good.
All right, thank you, Frank. This is a comment.
You can hold me to it once we're open and making money.
After November 6th, yeah. We'll see what happens. This goes to Scott. It's more of a comment, but we'll see if you agree with it or not, true or false. This is from Andrea. Thank you, Andrea, for the comment. Raw cannabis use has no psychoactive effects, but it's very helpful for curing disease. Do you agree with that comment?
I have no idea what the differentiation she's making and what type of diseases she's talking about, but
does it have psychoactive effects?
I mean, marijuana has psychoactive effects. Raw marijuana, because if you look at today's marijuana, they're growing the CBD out of it for the express results of THC levels. And even the CBD that's being found, and I'm sorry for people that don't understand, CBD is the non-psychoactive property found in marijuana that showed the most medical benefit. But the thing is, again, through the regulatory aspects that when we're testing it, we're finding THC in the CBD. So I don't,
Okay, that's the answer. The next question from the audience is both a comment and a question. Marijuana is a mind-altering drug. This is a statement she's putting down, or he or she. How will the state monitor and enforce individuals who get behind the wheel and endanger other drivers and citizens if they are high on marijuana? We'll start with you since you...
Okay, and this is, it's an interesting question because I had just been in Baltimore with some national leaders on addressing that issue, and these were Europeans as well as American scientists in trying to identify what levels that, intoxication is still at. And this is what's troubling is we don't know. Within the first 2 hours, there's a significant drop in the intoxication effects. But we still know that it's still in your body 30 days. Sometimes, chronic users, it's well over 30 days, 60, sometimes 90 days. So we're still seeing it. But are they impaired? Well, more than likely no. But how do you enforce that? So we're still working on that aspect, and that's a troubling aspect. But the thing is, when you say, I just want to lead into, when you say that, we're not going to see much more arrests, we're actually going to see more arrests because we're going to have to implement this. And you're going to have more people exposed and using. So you're going to see a lot more arrests, mostly with OUI.
All right, thank you for that answer. Appreciate it. Your thoughts on that issue and regulating driving when people are high in marijuana? That's a troubling issue, as Scott touched on, because the marijuana, it stays in your system, but the intoxicating effects may not stay in your system the 30 days that the actual plant itself is.
So yeah, so there's not going to be a breathalyzer for marijuana. That doesn't mean that our law enforcement officers can't administer sobriety tests. I think a sobriety test is a perfect gauge to see if somebody has the faculties to be operating a car. I also think that education is important. I think we need to have public education campaigns about the dangers of driving while smoking. You don't do it. You don't smoke and drive. One of the facts I read about Colorado was people are using marijuana as a substitute to alcohol over there. All right, and that's why traffic fatalities have actually gone down in Colorado. Driving under the influence of alcohol is much more dangerous. Not to say that it's not dangerous, to drive high, but yeah, I believe that the police should just administer sobriety tests. You know, that's how you handle that.
Okay, the next question for both of you, then we're going to wrap up this segment. This is a kind of a two-pronger. Marijuana, often referred to as a gateway drug. A, do you agree with that? B, in many cases, heavy drug users use marijuana as a gateway to sobriety, is what she says. Do you agree with that? And is that helpful? Let's go start with Frank.
I'm going to go back to that 55 million number. You know, there's 55 million Americans who use marijuana on a regular basis. And the majority of them do not, the overwhelming majority do not end up using heavier drugs, all right? Of course, you know, there are going to be heavy drug users that use marijuana, but no, I don't believe that it's a gateway drug in that sense. I'm sorry, what was the second part of the question?
Well, some people use it as a gateway drug to sobriety, is what this questioner says.
Sure. Oh, the second part of the question. I have read a bit about marijuana being used as an exit drug. What they're saying is, you know, in treatment, it helps get people through withdrawal symptoms, all right? So if people are in treatment for heavy drug use, they use marijuana to lessen those withdrawal symptoms. And marijuana itself doesn't make the treatment more successful, but what marijuana does is it keeps people in the treatment longer. And the length of that treatment is directly proportional to the success of the treatment.
Scott Macy, you touched on this earlier. Do you believe that marijuana is a gateway drug, and would it be effective as an exit drug as well?
Yeah, well, without a doubt, it's a gateway drug because what it does is it's got psychoactive properties. It's actually, we're doing a lot of brain mapping today in addiction, and we're seeing actually people on marijuana users and the brain actually being rewired, the endocannabinoids in the brain. So with those things being done, yes, so the brain's already affected, and then it leads to them wanting to use, other drugs. And like I say, it gave me the training wheels, if we don't want to use the word gateway, but it put me in situations. It lowered my inhibitions. It put me in front of my next drug. And then because my brain is wired differently because of the predisposition for addiction, we always talk about predisposition as a genetic component, but that was 10 years ago when I went through treatment. I can tell you it's changed significantly. Socialization now and the higher potency and the higher availability and the exposure are just as strong as genetic predisposition are. And as far as an exit drug, I've had this discussion. I mean, I was just in New York with a gentleman who owns a treatment facility out in California called High Sobriety, and that's how he treats people. But what's troubling is the brain is still compromised. And the only reason they're using it is because they're trying to equate it because it doesn't kill you. Because of the opiate epidemic and the heroin epidemic, people are dying, so they're saying, well, it's harm reduction. Well, yes, but the thing is, I mean, what are it's eventually going to lead right back. It's just like cigarette smoking. When we don't allow cigarette smoking in our treatment center because we're addressing a very addictive chemical. But there's a high incidence of people going to use cigarettes and, relapsing.
Time is up.
Can I add one comment?
One comment, yeah, real quick.
When he was talking about a gateway drug, one thing I do want to agree with the way that marijuana is a gateway drug, he said it puts him in situations. Right now, with marijuana being illegal, you're buying marijuana from a drug dealer who will obviously sell you other drugs if possible, and they're not going to check IDs, they'll sell to children. So yeah, it will definitely put you into situations where you can get into other drugs. It will be a gateway drug if kept illegal.
Yeah, up next we're going to talk about the impact that legalization may or may not have on the black market. But I first want to say thanks to Frank Morrow with the Greenhouse of Walled Lake. Yep, and Scott Macy with Brighton Recovery Center. More to come on It's Debatable. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's Debatable. The topic tonight is legalization of marijuana in the state of Michigan. I want to thank again the Dog Kings. And by the way, the singer and the guitarist, Dwayne Allen Harlick, has got a CD, Beneath the Surface. You can get that on Amazon.com. All right, this segment of the debate, we're joined by two gentlemen who are very familiar with this topic. Tom Levine is the Secretary of the Board for Am I Legalized? That's the grassroots partner in the coalition to regulate marijuana like alcohol. And he's an attorney at Cannabis Council in Detroit. Tom Levine, thanks so much. Randy Richardville is a very well-known name, former Speaker of the Michigan Senate, newly appointed with Healthy and Productive Michigan. Randy Richardville. We're going to start with the opening statements. Again, we decided this with a coin flip, and Tom Levine won the coin toss. So, Mr. Levine, you'll go first.
Yes, in putting together the ballot initiative that we are about to vote on in November, a very important aspect of this is industrial hemp. All the programs, they focus on smoking. We've already won that debate. It's obvious it's not a gateway drug. Plastics are choking our oceans. Hemp makes biodegradable plastic. Hempcrete builds safer and more healthy buildings. Rope, cordage, functional food. It has the perfect omega-3 to omega-6 combination. And so Michigan will become the most progressive industrial hemp state in the country, allowing for full production as opposed to just research. The U.S. military has used it for cordage for hundreds of years, and this is a very important and unique aspect to what Michigan will be able to vote on come November. And it's perhaps more impacting and more important than the consumption of marijuana. It's the same plant. It is prohibited entirely right now. It is a Schedule I, and I propose that this is the reason why it's been prohibited, because of big money interests, not only big pharma in terms of using it as medicine, but also the hempcrete and industrial products.
Thank you, Tom Levine. Appreciate it very much. The opening statement now from Mr. Randy Richardville.
I'm confused. I think I might have come to the wrong show. I didn't fully understand the opening comments. Because if this is talking about hemp and all the products that go along with hemp, why does hemp need to be regulated the same way as alcohol? I don't guess I could understand that part of it. But I'm here because I'm not an anti-marijuana guy. In fact, I think the only bill that's been passed, not the only one, but a significant one I passed 5 years ago that's still in law, that if the federal government says we're going to do something regarding medical marijuana, that it needs to be regulated. We outlined how it would be regulated, which is significantly different than the way the ballot initiative that passed in 2008 was regulated. Lara still has the information. They're still putting the regulations together. The committee was just put together in the last year or so. So it's taken approximately 10 years before we even get to the regulation of the medical marijuana bill that passed through a ballot initiative 10 years ago, which was written just about as poorly as this one, if hemp and products like rope is what we're talking about.
Randy Richardville, thank you. Opening statement. The first question does go to Mr. Richardville. Legalizing marijuana creates jobs. There were an estimated 122,814 legal full-time marijuana jobs in the United States as of last year. There's a new report from New Frontier Data that found that the cannabis industry could create 250,000 new jobs by the year 2020. There's a legislator in Oregon, Democrat, stated that the cannabis industry in the United States is expected to produce nearly 300,000 jobs by 2020 and grow to $24 billion by 2025. Doesn't Michigan need jobs, and is this an okay way to do that?
Well, there's so many things that I could talk about there. Michigan needs jobs, yes, but it's not just jobs. In fact, my undergraduate degree is in economics, my graduate degree is in business and business development. I've done strategic planning for Fortune 500 companies, and we have to look at economic impact, not just how many jobs are created. And what kind of jobs? Are these low-level jobs? Are these minimum wage jobs? What's the biggest problem we have in our workforce in Michigan today? Under-trained people in skilled trades. And what we're going to do is say, hey, we'll create a whole bunch of low-level jobs, and then we'll let marijuana slip into our schools and neighborhoods, and let kids that are supposed to be having their brains developed for this workforce have their brains stunted instead by this initiative.
Tom Levine, you have a rebuttal to that statement, the answer and the question.
Yes, the jobs will be created, and these are good paying jobs. Some of these lead cultivators, for example, they're making very good money. The industry is a profitable business that will be laid out once it's regulated, and these jobs will be good paying jobs. Now, another important aspect and a reason why we need to vote this in is people are being hung up with felonies so they can't get a job. So this sort of cycle of discrimination, read the book, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, for example, showing the racial discrimination, and this has been a way to deny jobs of our minorities, and this initiative is that much more important.
Tom Levine, thank you very much. The next question goes to you. The stated intent of legalizing marijuana in Michigan is as follows. This is on the ballot, the initiative. To prevent arrest and penalty for personal possession and cultivation of marijuana, remove the commercial production and distribution of marijuana from the illicit market, prevent revenue generated from commerce in marijuana from going to criminal enterprises or gangs, prevent the distribution of marijuana to persons under 21 years of age. This ballot initiative, the intent is to do all those things. There's a problem. The black market in states where pot has already been legalized still thrives because marijuana that is illegal is cheaper to purchase than marijuana that is now legal, taxed heavily. In the state of Michigan, you're talking 16% with the excise tax of 10% and the sales tax of 6%. Other states is even more than that. How is this, legalizing marijuana and taxing it, going to prevent the sale of illegal marijuana in the state?
Michigan got it right. We followed the Uruguay model. We have the lowest tax in the country. It's only 10%. Like Uruguay did, they charge a lesser tax and it's driven the black market out. That's what we're doing here in Michigan. You look at Colorado and some of the other states, it's like 30-something% for recreational and 20-something for medical. We're only 10% excise tax here. That's the reason why. We're driving out the black market, so vote yes.
Rebuttal from Randy Richardville. Would you agree with that?
I'm going back to my career and trying to figure out when the last time we modeled something after Uruguay. It just seems to escape me. I don't know. But if you look at 10%, here's my real problem. This is the first generation in the history of the United States that's going to live less time than the generation before them. Okay, that's their life expectancy today is lower than the generation before them. And why is that? We have obese kids. We have opioid problems. We have problems with people on the autism spectrum that have never been on that spectrum before. We don't even know why that's going on. We have suicide rates. We have people that are selling children. And now we say, you know what? Here's a good idea. Let's introduce recreational marijuana and make it easier to get into our classrooms and get into our schools. Let's let them deal with one more thing because they're already going to live less than we are. And now we're going to throw this in there too. And if you can guarantee, you go into this, the working families of the state of Michigan, sit down at the table and guarantee those parents that they're not going to, their teenage kids are not going to get into marijuana because of this, then I'll support you. But you can't do that.
Randy Richwell, thank you very much. The next question does go to you. A lot of people in prison, more than 40,000 in Michigan, 10% of Michigan kids. They've had a parent that has been incarcerated. Won't legalizing marijuana in the state free up some of our jails and then reunite kids with their parents?
I don't see how that logic comes to play at all. If people are in jail because they committed felonies, then we legalize something that is a felony today that makes that less people are going to be influenced or affected the same way. My belief is that when you ingest marijuana into these working families that I've been talking about, that causes a problem. I personally don't have any problem, probably more of a libertarian than anything else. If some adult wants to sit in his room at night and smoke a marijuana cigarette or do whatever, you know, the edibles, whatever, if that was regulated in a proper way, I wouldn't have a problem. My problem is there's no question that this is going to get into kids, and kids whose brains aren't finished formulating until they're 21, 25 years old. It's going to happen before then. And those are irreplaceable problems. And you're saying, well, you know, we did a ballot initiative 10 years ago. We rolled the dice. 10 years later, well, how many licenses did we give out? 30,000. 30,000 licenses today that are out there. And what's going on with those? They estimate between 60 and 80% of them are illegally distributing the product that they're growing. There's no regulation over the amount of THC. It's anywhere from 0 to 30%. It's not being regulated today. So now you're saying, let's throw another ballot initiative out there, roll the dice with the future of our kids that aren't going to live as long as they did before, and maybe this will work out in 10 years. I think it's ridiculous.
Randy Richardville, thank you. Rebuttal to Tom Levine regarding the population in the jails and the kids and their parents. What do you think about that?
Yes, the harm imposed by imprisoning parents is huge compared to the harm imposed by this plant that's been on the earth for how many thousands of years and been used by humans as both recreational and medicine. And I don't buy it. What, you think kids aren't using it now? Give me a break, Mr. Richardson. That's unrealistic.
No,
our kids are using it now. The problem is it's not regulated. It's not labeled. It's not packaged in a way that is under the new regulations. You will not be able to use packaging that's appealing to children. We're moving in the right direction. Everything will have to be labeled. There will be no sales to anybody under 21. During alcohol prohibition, alcohol poisonings of children was skyrocketed. After alcohol prohibition, it went down because it was regulated. This is a positive movement. Instead of going to the dealer on the corner to buy their marijuana, as they're doing now, let's be realistic here, where they can get opioids also, now it will be regulated. It'll be in provisioning center.
All right, Tom Levine, thank you. Now it's time for the candidates to ask each other a question. Tom Levine, we'll start with you.
Now, I'd like to ask you, with all the big money interests involved in this, I know that you are in the legislature and you appeared to represent some of those big money interests. Big pharma, big chemical, big petroleum. Don't you think all those would want prohibition? They're all profiting from it. Why not allow this natural resource that we've been denied all this while with, why not allow access to this natural resource again?
Give me I don't understand all the legislative thing and where big oil and all comes into this. Are you just taking a shot at my career and at my integrity and my character? Because it sounded like it.
What I'm saying is, don't you think big moneyed interest is behind prohibition? And wouldn't the ending of prohibition impact negatively this big money interest?
No, the only person I see that's getting big money from this industry is you. All right. Right? And you said a few minutes ago, let's face it, these people go to the corner now and get it illegally from their dealers, then they come in and pay my paycheck. That's basically what you said. And so don't question me and my legislative career, which I'll put up against anyone's in the last 20 years, because I tried to do what was right, and I did what was right for the people of the state of Michigan as well as the people that I represented in my district. And one of the things I did do was introduce a bill that regulated marijuana. And it did it in a way where it's dealt with much more like a pharmacy than a pharmaceutical than it is. It would be a Section 2 drug under that bill that was passed and signed into law 5 years ago. Okay, so I'm okay with responsible marijuana. Putting it on a ballot is not responsible. We've seen that over the last 10 years.
Next question is for Randy Richardville to Tom Levine.
You want to go out for a beer after this?
That was a quick one.
I mean, you know, because I think it's okay to be passionate and disagree, but I think we should be respectful, and we were probably hinging on that a little bit, but I do want it to be a debate that's meaningful, that is passionate. I'm really concerned about what happened 10 years ago, having been in the legislature at that time, and then being told, hey, here you go, fix this. And it took 7, 8, 9 years before we got a real initiative going. Do you really believe that don't you think it'd be better if we got those rules and regulations in place before we said, let's legalize it, instead of saying, let's legalize it and go the other direction? That's my question.
Well, actually, the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act that was written very clearly was screwed up by the courts. So it was not unclearly written, but the courts misinterpreted it and kind of messed it up a little bit. So in terms of the 10 years, it's 10 years of twisting it away from its intended protections. And I really believe that in order to protect the patients, we need legalization, in effect, because we've seen 10 years of the state disregarding patient and caregiver rights and felonies being thrown at patients and caregivers. You know, I'm a sex trafficking activist, and I want law enforcement's priorities to be reset on what's important.
And I think, Tom, in response to that, real quickly, I think that the Uruguay model going 10% and all doesn't create enough of the enforcement that would be necessary to ensure that the things that scare me and the other working families out there, that those rules and regulations are enforced, not just written.
Quick response to that or no?
No.
10 seconds, all right. 0 seconds. All right, thanks. Up next, we're going to take audience questions. We'll be right back. Our final question and answer section tonight, it deals with audience questions, and we will start off with this one from a member of the audience who did not leave a name. What positive or negative effects have states that have legalized marijuana, like Colorado and Washington State, what positive and negative effects have they seen? We'll start with Tom Levine.
Well, a 25% decrease in road fatalities in Colorado, where recreational has been permitted for quite a while. A group of 21-year-olds going out on a Friday night, now they have an option. Instead of having to go to the bar to meet chicks, they can go somewhere else and consume this instead, where they're less likely to undertake high-risk activity. It's alcohol is where you're more likely to undertake high-risk activity. Marijuana, even in some of the driving studies, the people who consume marijuana were more likely to say, no, I'm a little bit too high to drive, and able to make that rational decision.
You concerned about meeting chicks?
No, I have no comment.
Okay.
When I was the majority leader of the Michigan Senate, we had some bills to consider about medical marijuana. And usually the Government Operations Committee is the one where you send things to die. But I specifically asked those bills, in fact, instructed those bills to come to my committee so that some of the more senior members of the legislature could sit in front and listen to the dialogue. People came up that had children that had epilepsy, that had maybe 30 seizures a day, found some kinds of medical marijuana strains that eliminated it, where they had 1 or 2 a month. But people that had cancer, and there were specific strains that they had found help with this type of cancer, this type of migraine headache. And I saw some incredible, almost miraculous type of usage of marijuana, medical marijuana, in the right regard. Unfortunately, in Colorado, what we saw was when medical marijuana was passed through the legislature, there was an increase of approximately 2% of new users of underage children. But when they passed recreational, it got to be so loose that instead the increase went to 74%. That is not the chance that I am willing to take with our kids, is that if we pass this, someday down the road we'll regulate it, and I can guarantee it won't get to our kids, because the history has shown in places like Colorado, it happens, and it ends up in our neighborhoods, in our schools, where, like it or not, you got a 3rd grade little girl walking into class saying, I got these gummy bears at home, when in fact, they're mom and dad's gummy bears and have high levels of THC in them. When you can assure me that that doesn't happen like it has in Colorado, I might get on your side.
Next question. The race issue has been brought up a few times tonight. There's different data that favors one side over the other, depending on how you look at it. This comment from the audience says more people of color have been arrested in Colorado since legalization of marijuana. Randy Richardville, do you believe that marijuana and the legalization of it is a race issue? And are you concerned about the number of the disparity between the number of minorities being arrested versus whites in relation to marijuana?
Yeah, I haven't looked at the numbers, and I don't know which side. I've heard, earlier tonight, trying to listen to both sides of things, I heard conflicting information. I haven't thought and don't have the kind of data in front of me that would indicate one or the other. But for me, it doesn't have anything to do with race. Whether you're African American, Latino, or Asian, or whatever, if marijuana is being introduced to your kids, I think it's a bad thing.
You've indicated, Tom Levine, that you think this might be a race issue.
Yes, great book on the topic, The New Jim Crow, written by Ohio State University law professor Michelle Alexander, has all the data. It's a race issue. It started that way. It's been on that trajectory ever since. There's a huge disparity. It's one of the reasons why we need legalization, for social justice. And I'm all about social justice. It's a social justice issue. And there's no reason whatsoever why, you know, actually looking at legalized states, American Journal of Public Health finds no increase in teen use. It's no longer a taboo if it's legal. So that kid's rite of passage to, you know, breaking the rules or whatever, it's not there anymore because it's legal. Also with the medical, there's a greater amount of respect for it as a medicine. So this is a positive direction rather than it being on the streets and too accessible to our children right now.
Okay, final question from the audience tonight. Is marijuana the next big tobacco? Tom Levine.
No, it isn't. And I really resent the comparison with tobacco. I've never smoked a cigarette in my life. And I'm an athlete. And marijuana improves lung health. It's qualitatively different. I'm an endurance athlete. Smoking marijuana, I asked the doctor, are you sure that smoking marijuana is not harmful to the lungs? The answer is crystal clear, yes. And this is the most researched drug in the world. Look at PubMed, peer-reviewed studies in research cannabis. Just put in the keyword cannabis and you'll see. This is more research certainly than the current pharmaceuticals who can throw it out into the market and use us as their lab rats now. That's the latest movement of deregulation. They can test it on the marketplace, and if too many of us die, then they'll pull it back. Oh, great. That's where we're at with pharmaceuticals. This has never killed anybody.
It seems it's a lot like where we're at with the ballot proposal too then. What you just described is let's throw it out there and see how it goes. Yeah. And so I would say that. But
2,000 years of use.
But I think there's one other aspect. I haven't heard it tonight, so real quickly. The federal government today says marijuana usage is illegal. And I think they should stay out of it. I think they should say, you know what, let's let individual states deal with it by themselves and we'll pull back a little bit. And then let Michigan do its homework. We have the first land-grant university in the United States, Michigan State. They know more about agriculture than anybody, and we have one of the best medical schools, medical research schools in the University of Michigan. Wouldn't it be great if we could take cannabis and we say, let's tear it apart. What's the best way to grow these strains because we can show that this helps these people? We're missing an opportunity here to take a plant that could have some miraculous kind of effect. But we can't do that because the federal government's in our way right now because the funding would be dissipated for the universities if they went in that direction. I would be much more apt to support a scientific study than these, what I consider to be crapshoots on a ballot proposal.
All right, thank you very much for both of your comments. You're answering the questions. Tom Levine and Randy Richardville. Up next, some concluding thoughts and a reminder to vote in November on this initiative. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thank you very much. That is our It's Debatable. The topic was legalizing Michigan, state is legalizing marijuana in the state of Michigan. It's on the ballot November 6th in the state. It goes under the title Michigan Marijuana Legalization Initiative. Roberta Jacita and myself will have all the continued coverage on WWJ every morning, 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. Continued coverage on WWJ. I want to thank our candidates, Tom Levine, Randy Richardville, Frank Mara, Scott Macy, Barton Morris, Matthew Yasko. Thanks to our candidates here tonight very much for coming. Also to the audience, thank you for being here, our tremendous crew. This is a stellar job that was put on tonight by the crew here at Music Town and Lift Lounge. Thanks to Lift and Music Town, Hockey Town underneath, and the hardworking news team at WWJ. And of course, the band, the Dog Kings, thank you very much. Have a good night. Appreciate your time.